Welcome to the Parent Advocate Podcast, a show where we celebrate, defend, support, and uplift the voices of the LGBTQIA community. I'm your host, Stephen Chikumba. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Lisette Trujillo.
Hey everyone, Lisette here, she, her, Aya. The mission of the Parent Advocate podcast is to elevate conversations and reframe narratives around trans and non-binary youth to help change hearts and minds. Each week, we bring you our take on all things happening from the perspective of two parents of BIPOC transgender kids.
Lisette, we have an absolute badass on our show, one of the foremost experts in providing assistance and therapy to parents and gender expansive children.
That's right, Stephen. Today we're speaking to Dr. Michele Angello, who I constantly want to say D'Angelo because of the singer. And so I apologize if that slips up somewhere along the way. But Dr. Michele Angello is the author of Raising the Transgender Child.
I just read the book and I cannot wait to talk to her about it. So, welcome everyone once again to the Parent Advocate Podcast. Let's get started. Lisette, what the fuck is happening in this fucking country?
Oh, Stephen, there's so much awfulness happening in this world. I mean, if it's not one thing, it's another. But I do have something really special to share. So on December 6th, Daniel was given the 2025 Billy Bean Youth Activist Award. It was presented to him by the Stonewall in Gives Initiative, and they let him send in like a video response accepting the award. And it was really just such a lovely experience. And I think it was really special for Daniel because he is being honored in a way that sees him as an extension of the Stonewall legacy. And so it was a big moving honor for all of us. And they also honored Miss Major, and he talked about, Miss Major in his speech as well. And so it was just really, really special. And we were bummed, obviously, that we couldn't be there.
Obviously, but congratulations to Daniel.
I
I am
know.
so impressed by this young man and his activism. Obviously, the apple does not fall too far from the tree
Mm-mm.
because you all have modeled what it is to be activists and advocates and actively engaged in supporting community. And I think he has taken up the mantle that his parents have put down regarding that.
Aw, thank you. And on another side note, a good note, I guess, is Daniel had like his first entry interview with a college he wants to go to in Spain. It's an art and music school. And so he's really, really, really excited about it.
That's so dope. That is
I
so
know.
dope. So I believe in manifestation. So if he sees
It's gonna happen.
himself getting admitted, he's getting admitted.
Yeah,
Period. Full stop.
he said that it's happening.
Of course it's happening.
So we're all about it. But those are the good things that are happening in my life, besides all the stressors of this crazy ass world and anti-trans rhetoric being global and just going nuts in the US. And I want to know, what are some good things happening in your world?
Okay, so this isn't quite the same thing as, getting this Stonewall Legacy Award that Daniel got, being recognized alongside of Miss Major. It's not all that. But yesterday at my job, I received the Leadership Award for stepping up in my department after my boss left. I was like, who knew that these people were even thinking about me? And I got awarded this award in the middle of this meeting that we had, this team meeting where everybody was gathering. I was so surprised and honored, honestly, to be recognized by my coworkers in this way. Completely unexpected. So not the same, but definitely made me feel good that my colleagues acknowledge the efforts that I'm making at the job.
Stephen, what if you just get promoted with a bigger paycheck?
I mean, I'll take that too.
Manifest it.
Manifestation always. What else happened? What else happened? Oh, so on some not so good news, did I say we didn't get into Sundance?
No.
Yeah, we got word on Monday, which was the day that notifications were going out, that we didn't get into Sundance. Now, in fairness, what we submitted was mad rough. I can't front. I watched our latest cut and it's so tight. And I said to Lucina, I was like, if only we had this cut when we submitted to Sundance, they'd have definitely taken us. But it's all good. We have what I think is an amazing movie, and Sundance just lost out. They lost out. This is their loss. This isn't our loss. This is their loss. And so, but yeah, that happened. And I was in my feels because I've been working on this damn movie for like the past year and a half, even more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And you feel some kind of way when people don't take to your creative output the way you think they should. But as an artiste, I have to learn how to accept rejection. And everything happens for a reason. And so that is how I've grounded myself in this moment.
Well, I think you need to submit to Tribeca.
Oh, we're submitting to everything. Like, we're Sundance is just the first festival on the festival calendar for 2026. They have the earliest submission deadline. Tribeca, Toronto, South by Southwest, Martha's Vineyard, African American Film Festival, San Diego Film Festival, San Francisco Film Festival, Telluride. Like, we're submitting to all of them. And, we'll see what happens. Obviously, there's a whole lot of like other things you have to think about. Is it a world premiere? Is it an international premiere? There's all kinds of things that we have to think about. And so some places we'll submit to, some places we may be invited to. Again, we are going to get this film out, notwithstanding what Sundance did not see in it at the time. And it's okay. But that was like the little downside of my week, but I'm not going to let it get me down because, again, the finished product is amazing and I cannot wait to share it with the world.
You need Robert De Niro to see it, and he's Tribeca. Because again, his daughter is trans. And what if he just becomes a dad? One of the dads. I mean, think about it. If you got like Taxi Driver, Wise Guy, like Serpico, Godfather, De Niro as one of the dads.
Listen, your lips to God's ears. That's all I'm going to say.
Could you imagine him making a PSA where he just like puts everybody who puts anti-trans shit, anti-trans laws, and files them? Like, imagine a De Niro PSA.
I'm loving it. Lisette, I'm loving it.
That's all I want.
I believe
it's a De Niro PSA.
I believe in manifestation. I believe that as we speak it, it shall come to pass. I agree with you. Tribeca is a great spot. And don't make me have a Q&A like as part of my impact campaign, Robert De Niro making a PSA. Like all of that is, I think, doable, achievable, conceivable. Like let's make it happen.
Let's do it.
Let's make it happen after we talk about today's topics.
All right, let's get to today's topics.
Lisette, I think I started this episode talking about like the fuckery that is this country, and you corrected me that it is this world. But let's talk about the city of Arlington, Texas, which is the first city in the nation to reverse anti-discrimination policies after they've been enacted into law in the state. The Arlington City Council voted 5-4 on Tuesday in favor of a revised ordinance that removes gender identity and expression and sexual orientation as protected characteristics from the city's anti-discrimination policy, which means that people can discriminate against other people based on gender identity or expression or based on sexual orientation. How do you take away rights after they've been granted? Like, what fucking reverse, upside down universe are we living in? Explain it to me.
Well, for the people who don't know about Reconstruction, it's exactly what they did back in the day, is take away the rights again that they had granted freed Black people in our country. And so we're going to see this fuckery. We're going to see this fuckery where they're going to start reversing policy protections that have been long, hard fought for. And it's infuriating. It is infuriating. And I always think about the podcast episode with Amara and Susan Stryker, where Susan Stryker clearly says, if we want to fight this moment, we have to look at Reconstruction. That's what I keep thinking about when people are talking about how do we fight back and can all of our rights backslide? And it's like, yeah, it can backslide, and it's terrifying. That's why we need more parents speaking up and standing up.
I mean, we need everyone speaking up and standing up because, again, we are talking about a trend, a disturbing trend where folks are going out of their way to take away rights that have been legally granted. Why, when there's so much else wrong in this world today, are we focusing on depriving this small subset of people from legal protections? Like, what are you doing? Why are you saying it's okay to discriminate for any reason? Discrimination is bad. Anti-discrimination protections are good. Why are you taking a law off the books that protects people? Someone make it make sense.
It makes me lose faith in people. I'm just like, these people are some hater asses. And I don't know. I don't have adequate words other than curse words. And then in other news, alongside with continued fuckery on something that should be so simple and self-explanatory, But the Trevor Project put out a new report stating that trans and non-binary youth from ages 13 to 24 whose pronouns were respected were 31% less likely to attempt suicide in the past year, as opposed to the nearly one-fourth or 23% who said that none of the people they knew would use correct names and pronouns and that they had attempted self-harm. Stephen, this is so frustrating because, again, common sense, right? Respecting people's name and pronouns. Just like you would want anti-discrimination policies to exist. And yet there are youth who are surrounded by people who refuse to see them and affirm them.
Lisette, when I read that, I was once again so upset and annoyed by people because, like, what are we doing? The stats are there.
Mhm.
The information is there. Affirming gender expansive children saves lives. Period. Study after study has demonstrated that when children are supported and affirmed, they have better outcomes. When children have access to gender affirming care, they have better outcomes. When children are allowed to participate in sports on teams that align with their gender, they have better outcomes. But when you stop affirming a child by using their name and pronouns, when you stop allowing children to access gender affirming care, when you stop allowing children to participate on teams that align with how they see themselves, then what you have are increased self harm, increased suicidal ideation, increased suicide attempts, lower sense of self and quality of life. And we're talking about children. Who is going out of their way to harm children? Because that's essentially what's happening. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about anything other than how do we protect the most vulnerable members of our society? We certainly don't do that by stripping away anti-discrimination protections. We certainly don't do that by failing to use names and pronouns that allow children to feel affirmed and supported about who they are. We certainly don't allow bullies to just run ripshod through schools and treat other children with disdain and harm and harassment because of how they identify. So where is this okay? How is this okay with people? I just don't understand.
And it reminds me of that poll, that Pew poll that came out in September that said that only 30% of parents actually support and affirm their children. That means 70% of trans, non-binary, gender expansive people live in homes where their own parents do not believe them, support them, and love them enough to affirm them.
That shit is so crazy. But Lisa, we can't make some of this shit up. We literally can't make some of this shit up. I just read about a Republican attorney. I think his name is James Utheimer. He's from Florida. No surprise there. Who filed a lawsuit against WPATH, the Endocrine Society, and the American Academy of Pediatrics. He filed a complaint accusing them of violating RICO standards by essentially utilizing junk science as evidence-based standard of a crime. So essentially, by supporting gender-affirming care as the standard of care for gender-expansive people, they are committing a crime because it's junk science. Like, can you imagine the caucasity of this person to file a complaint charging the most reputable medical institutions in the country with a RICO violation? Like, have you ever?
Stephen, I don't even know what a RICO Act violation is, but it doesn't sound good. And it also sounds not right because the Endocrine Society, the American Academy of Pediatrics, WPATH are doing everything they can, for the most part, to protect and follow their oath of doing no harm and serving the most vulnerable population through accurate, life-saving medical care.
I mean, we know that this is some political bullshit being pushed by people who have literally nothing better to do with their time than wage these artificial culture wars about issues that 99.9% of Americans don't give a fuck about. And the only people who actually care about the fact that this lawsuit is being filed, besides the defendants, are the parents of gender expansive children and adults who rely on the care that these reputable medical establishments have created and the guidelines around the care that have been created to ensure that trans people get the best possible care out there, that there are standards that medical providers adhere to with respect to providing these life saving practices. It's not as if suddenly the Endocrine Society said, hey, let's just start giving hormones to kids. That's not how any of this works. And more importantly, like, I cannot stress this a fucking enough. Cisgender children who do not identify as trans or non binary or gender expansive or gender nonconforming get the exact same medical
Yes.
treatments at
Yes.
the exact same ages
Hmm.
over the exact same periods of time for medical conditions. The
Yep.
medical interventions that are provided by doctors, the prescriptions that are signed off by doctors, the puberty blockers that are administered by doctors are safe and effective for cisgender children. And so everyone needs to understand, just because there is a ban on gender affirming care for transgender kids does not mean that the exact same procedures, the exact same medical intervention, the exact same hormone therapies are not being applied to children. That's not what it means.
In fact, it's laid out that way in the medical care bans that they file, that it is only a ban on A, B, and C people, right? With a certain diagnosis. So if you are transgender in the state of Florida, you can't access certain care that cis kids can. And it's explicitly stated that way. And so, of course, we know it's a discriminatory law. All of what you said is 100% true.
I know that, and you know that. But 99.9% of the people who are out here spouting right talking points don't know that, don't understand that, or don't care about that. Very important fact. And that creates a lot of trauma and
Mhm.
stress and mental health issues and suicidal ideation and self harm and all the things that our next guest will hopefully help us unpack. So before I get any angrier, how about we get to today's guest?
Let's do this, Stephen. I'm really excited.
Dr. Michele Angello is a nationally recognized therapist, educator, and author specializing in the care and support of transgender and gender expansive youth and their families. With more than 2 decades of clinical experience, she has become one of the most trusted experts guiding parents, schools, and healthcare providers in understanding gender identity and affirming care. Dr. Angelo is the author of Raising the Transgender Child, a groundbreaking resource that has helped thousands of families navigate their children's journey with clarity, compassion, and confidence. Dr. Angelo has trained clinicians and educators across the country, bringing evidence based practices and human centered insights to communities seeking to better support trans youth. Her work has been featured in documentaries, national media, and academic settings where she continues to advocate for informed, empathetic approaches to care. In her private practice, she works closely with children, teens, adults, and families, helping them build pathways towards authenticity and well being. Dr. Angelo remains a leading voice for love, affirmation, and resilience at a time when transgender youth and their families need it most. Everyone, please welcome Dr. Michele Angelo to our show. Welcome to the show, Dr. Angelo. I'm so happy you could join us today.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Can you share with us your story of how you first began working with transgender and gender expansive youth and their families? What drew you to this field?
Sure, I'd be happy to. It's kind of a funny and convoluted story, but I'll try to give you the abridged version. When I was in grad school as an openly queer woman, I made the false assumption that I knew a heck of a lot more than I did about being trans. And so when I sat in on one of my classes in the human sexuality program, and the professor had a panel of trans folks come in and speak to us, I was embarrassed. I was blown away. I was all the things, and I immediately, and this is dating myself a little bit, but I immediately went home and made some phone calls because it was in the 90s that I was in grad school. And I apologized to my trans friends and I said, holy shit, I made so many wrong assumptions that just because I'm queer, I know about your experience. Will you forgive me? And of course, they were my friends. And so they were kind and gentle with me. And they said, absolutely. But if you happen, and this, I was getting a master's degree at the time, they said, if you get a doctoral degree, your obligation, your reparations are to do research on the trans community. And I said, and again, I'm telling you this, whatever, with all the embarrassment that I had at the time for saying it, but I had no intentions of getting a doctorate. So I quickly was just like, absolutely, no problem, done, consider it done. And then I ended up in school again, getting my doctorate. And I was like, oh shit, I got to make good on that promise. So I did, and I mean happy to, but I ended up doing my doctoral dissertation on gender identity dynamics through the lifespan. And I had the privilege of co-writing that dissertation with an individual who was able to get political asylum from Colombia. She was a physician and a trans woman, and we were able to get that research together for that dissertation in the 90s. And fast forward, I didn't really have intentions of having a practice that focused on trans and non-binary folks, but that's what came to me, thankfully. And a few years into working with adults, because my training, my psychological training is at the time with adults and adolescents, but I started getting calls from really frightened parents in the early 2000s saying, we don't know what to do. Our kid thinks this. We have no one to go to. Can you help us? And so the scramble began where I had to get some training just in basic child development. And after I did that, I welcomed gender expansive families of all kinds of gender, folks who were just exploring gender, folks who knew what their gender was, the whole gamut. So currently 95% of my practice is transgender, nonconforming, gender exploring in some way. And about 50% of those folks are children and families.
So, Lisette, you have to understand that I met Michelle, who I default to wanting to call her Dr. Angelo because she did the work to earn her degree, but she is so gracious. She's not one of those people who needs the honorific. So, I met Michelle at the Keystone Conference in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania last year, where that organization donated $13,000 to the Dad's Foundation. And Michelle was one of the people who was at that conference. And Wayne, as you know, is like the ambassador for our organization. He knew her. He introduced us. We got along like gangbusters, and I invited her to the show. And you have to also understand she was dressed to the nines. Game recognized game. I recognize this as a kindred spirit from who knows how many cycles around the world we've taken before we finally met each other. Long story short, I met her. I invited her onto the show because I was like, wow, you've been doing this a long time. You've been working with families of gender expansive youth. You've been counseling families of gender expansive youth. You've been helping people understand that what we're talking about it's not a contagion. There's nothing wrong with gender expansive people. There's nothing wrong with trans and non-binary people. And there's also nothing wrong with being taken aback by the news that your child is not what you thought they were. So, Dr. Angelo, I say all that to say, what were some of the most impactful experiences you had with families who were new to this knowledge and understanding, but who needed help to get past that impasse of the inability to accept what their children were telling them?
Absolutely. And just as a quick side, I have to say about game recognizing game, my wife even excused herself at that gala because Steven and I were clearly vibing and just said, I don't even know what's happening here, but I'm going to be over here. So you guys just do whatever you're doing.
Bless her heart.
It was lovely. And I'm so thankful that we made that connection. So some of the, and I'm sorry, was some of the most memorable or
I would say memorable or impactful because I think
impactful?
a lot of what impressed me about you was just the breadth of your experience with these families.
Thank you. Well, yeah, there's so many, and I have to tell you that I had absolutely zero intention, as I said in my kind of intro, of I didn't think this was going to be my life's work, and I am incredibly appreciative that it is, but that wasn't where my head was. So when I got to meet these families with these amazing kids, I have to say, undoubtedly, trans and gender expansive people in general, but kids in particular, are the most introspective people I've ever met in my life. And that breaks my heart and it warms my heart. And it breaks my heart because these kids are walking around with burdens that most of us never even have to think about, and if ever, until we're well into adulthood. And that leads me then to one of the first things that I will say is one of my most impactful memories. And it was a very long time ago, but it was one of the probably in the top 20, I mean, the first 20 kids I saw in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. And this kid came in and she was, you want to talk about dressed to the nines. This little girl came in and she had her best Sunday clothes on. She was ready to go. She was fantastic. And she just told me all the things I needed to know about her. And this is why I'm a girl. And she was 9 years old. Very precocious, as many trans kids are, just because they have to think about so many things. And we had a lovely session. She went home. Okay, hey, great. See you next week. We're going to do a family session. The mom called me 2 days or so after I first saw this 9-year-old girl, and she said, I don't know what's going on. She won't talk to me, but she said she needs an emergency session. She's not in crisis, but she really, really wants to see you. She comes in. I said, what's on your mind? And she said, well, I need you to honestly answer an important question for me. And I said, yeah, absolutely. What is it? She said, where do babies come from? And I was like, oh, whoa, I'm not sure this is the work we're supposed to be doing right now, but let me try to get to the bottom, because as always, there's going to be 3 or 4 questions behind the question. So what was she really thinking? And she finally said not finally, it was 1 or 2 questions in. She said, Dr. Michelle, all my life, and this is her sweet little 9 years, but all my life, all I've wanted to be is a mommy. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to be a mommy. And if I can't be a mommy, I don't know if I want to live. And I'm getting teary thinking about it. But this little beautiful child was just, I need to know how, can you tell me how to be a mommy? And I was like, oh, whoa. First of all, again, to my, whatever, I didn't have all the early childhood backing that I wish I had had at the time. But I went, I went with it, and I said, okay, well, let's talk about all the ways that people get to be mommies. As somebody who has 2 adopted children, I can easily go into that mode and say, I have a kid that came out of my belly, and I have a kid that I adopted, and I love them all exactly the same. And I hope for you that some version of that will be your experience. And we talked about it. And she only lasted about 15 minutes into that session. We saw each other for years after that, but that was crisis averted. Okay, good. My point is, not that many 9-year-olds have to worry about fertility. And that really was just like, oh, damn it. I'm so sorry that has to be on your mind right now. But also, damn it, what a brilliant way to just, open your mind enough in this kid's case to say, like, oh, okay, then I guess that's not the dream, but all right, I can make the dream come true in a different way.
I'm curious if when you had your family session with them, if you asked if that was a conversation happening in their home, right? Because so much of what I hear from parents is them projecting what they won't attain with their child, which they in turn internalize, right? And so I'm curious to know if that was a conversation this young girl was hearing around, like, well, you won't be this, and I'm so sad. And so much of that, and I asked this because I ran a parent community for many, many years and listened to parent stories. But over the decade that I was there, their kids started to trust me and tell me the counter story to their parents, experience. Yeah. And it was insightful to hear the ways in which we harm our children through the things that we're saying without meaning to.
Well, implicit messages are strong, and kids aren't stupid. And I will say that for that particular family, it wasn't an explicit conversation, but that particular, in many families, I mean, I could, let's say, a compilation of a lot of families have a kind of generalized story in a way. I mean, if they're a member of a faith community, there's always a story about faith. If their kid goes to school outside of their home, there's always a story about school. And yes, as parents, we are unintentionally throwing these messages out, but also the world is throwing them out too. I mean, and even in a lot of my most well-intentioned, most informed and loving families, they don't live in a vacuum. And so they step outside of their door, and they're going to hear the explicit or implicit messages about expectations around gender.
I'm so glad that you brought this story up, because it kind of goes into the next question that we had for you, which was that you were beginning this career journey and working with families at a time when there wasn't a lot of information on trans youth specifically. So what was it that you felt like your clinical training prepared you for, and also where it sort of failed you in terms of like the time you were starting this journey and the limits of information at hand?
I mean, the paucity of research data, whatever else to fall back on in the 90s I think that goes without say. Even trying to write the dissertation in any kind of a scientific fashion was a stretch. I mean, we did a qualitative study, but it was still really difficult to even get sample sizes large enough to be valid and empirical. But I mean, there were some things out there. There were the start of some conferences. I'm blanking right now what the new name is, but the Philadelphia Trans Health Conference used to be a really thriving community at the time in the early 2000s and I was part of that initial conference. And, that was a nice resource to bounce around in a little bit. Those were some of the newest families, at least that I worked with, would show up at conferences like that. There just wasn't a heck of a lot. As far as my training went, I was absolutely ill-equipped to be doing what I was doing. I tried to be as transparent as possible, saying, I am not educated enough to do this. Then, I mean, the response was always, and I understood because I too went for the resources for these folks, and there wasn't anybody any more qualified, sadly. So I did some quick collaboration with some folks. About a decade ago, and unfortunately since COVID, that it hasn't been happening, but about a decade ago, I started with Widener University, which is in Philly. We began a training program for folks at the graduate level where they could do a year-long certification program in gender affirming trans care. So there are a few of those programs kind of sprinkled about, but there aren't nearly enough of them. So what I didn't have is could fill many podcasts. But what I what I did have was, I mean, my own grounded queer identity, recognizing to the best of my ability what it meant to be a marginalized person, and realizing that as a young queer woman who'd had my own sexual trauma that wasn't well dealt with because I had a shitty therapist, I knew that I wanted to do better than what I had, and that was the best I could do at the time.
So I think that is a perfect segue to introduce one of the elements that we raised in your intro, which is that you are the author of this book. For those of you who are watching, it's called Raising the Transgender Child, which you co-wrote with Elisa Bowman. And for those of you who can see this also, she signed my copy here. She signed it. I have a signed copy. So I feel super special. And I'm embarrassed to say that I met Michelle in like June of this year. And we've been trying to do this thing with the podcast. She found my email. She reached out to me. She's like, have you read the book? Child, it was like December. I hadn't read it. And so I was like, I am not going to have this woman on our show without having read her book. And I am so thankful that I did because it's amazing. It was exactly what I was looking for in 2017 when Hobbs shared his identity with me. And I didn't have this book because I didn't know you. I didn't even know what resources were out there. Google didn't help me find it. But I think this book is amazing. So now that you've talked about your dissertation and the start of your career, what inspired you to write this oh so necessary book?
Well, thank you. Let me tell you what inspired me to write that book by telling you that I also wrote this book, which is called On the Couch with Dr. Angelo in 2013. And I had to self-publish that book because I had so much in my head that I felt like I was in a very small crowd of folks who were doing the work. And I felt like I needed to get it out of my own head and onto paper. And I wrote it and I workshopped it and I did everything I could do. And all the big publishing companies said, thanks, but there's no market for that. So I self-published it and was happy to just kind of be done because I'm not a natural writer. And so I then was approached 3 years later. So the first one was written in 2013, 3 years later, by a literary agent who said, oh my God, the time is ripe. You have to write a book. And Elisa Bowman and I were collaborating a lot because she's the mom of a fantastic trans boy. And so we were just, I would do the psychobabble and she would do but this is the real life experience. And we collaborated and put that second book together. And so that was really, to be perfectly honest, the inspiration didn't come to me. From me, it came to me by somebody saying, hey, now's the time. And oh, by the way, you don't have to figure out how to self-publish it this time. We'll do it for you. And I was really thrilled to be able to do it. The only downside to the book was that sadly it came out right after the 2016 election. And so we didn't get the book tour that we hoped to get.
If readers walked away remembering only 3 insights from your book, what would you hope those insights are?
Great question. Well, one of them that I feel like it's probably very cliche, but I say it to every new parent or caregiver that I talk to, which is you're never going to do wrong by your kid by loving them and understanding and accepting them in the moment where they are today, or this minute, whatever it is. So you're never going to do wrong by that because parents are, but what if I do? And then you're never going to do wrong. So that for me, I hope lightens the burden because again, when we're in our uncharted territory, our minds tend to just feel scrambled and it's just like, oh my God, but I have to solve this problem and this problem. To me, it's start with love. Everything starts with love. And so if you can just take a deep breath and start with love, you're at a really good starting point. The others, gosh, just three. One of them, and I'm going to kind of incorporate both books a little bit in the answer since I just have three, but I'll tell you that the first book, one of the inspirations to write it, and that which then just kind of led into the second one was, and it's kind of ironic because in 2013, I don't remember hearing a lot about this concept of empathy gap, but I wrote about it in 2013, and I'm so glad I did because we're really bottoming out at this point. I feel like we just need to get a hold of that. We have to stop not even trying to understand another person's experience. We just shut the walls down. Anyway, sorry, that's a soapbox for another day. But about the book, there's a few things, and again, a lot of it is going to need to change because it was written in 2016 and we have tons of updates and so many things in that are fluid at the moment. But I do think that talking with parents about ways to engage with their child's school is a really important chapter. I just feel like that's also such a confusing territory for so many parents. We tried through the book to break it down so that it's not so frightening and so that you can go in as not just your child's advocate, because you're always going, we're always our child's advocate, but also as a boss walking in there like, here's my 504 plan. Would you like to just take this one and use it? Or do you want to do it on your own because my kid's going to get whatever it is that you're looking for your kid to get. We just tried to map it out. So it's like, look, you can do this, you can do this, and you can do this.
Michelle,
And
I'm sorry. I have
it's
to interrupt you because one of the notes that I wrote when I was reading this book was about the getting an education chapter, which I loved. I have a whole bunch of hearts around that title for the chapter because you did what every parent needs, which is you gave excuses that you're going to hear as a parent advocating for your child and the responses you can give them. And oh my God, again, I wish I had this book when Hobbes came out because it was so moving. And it's like literally you listed so many of the things that we hear from schools, from guidance counselors, from nurses about where to use the bathroom and whether they should be allowed to participate on teams and why they can or cannot make an accommodation and what the discrimination looks like. And you were just like chopping all these excuses down with facts. And so I love that that's one of the things that you think is important as a takeaway, because I know for a fact that was one of the ones that I was like, oh, absolutely, this book is manna from heaven. You may continue.
Thank you, because our kids spend the majority of their days there. So it better be a comfortable environment for them. So the other thing I'm most proud of, and I will give Alyssa all the props for this, is it's really common sense. So again, like you said, Stephen, I appreciate that you recognize that we just wanted it to be, we know you're already swimming in information. So let us break it down to bare bones. And then you can make it as creative as you want to after that. But here's your boilerplate. And throughout the book, what we really tried to do, and I guess, this really was more my role of it, was to give the anecdotal things. And as you said, a lot of the, I practice role play in my therapeutic practice a lot. And I find it to be incredibly helpful, especially for tweens and teens, adolescents, and whether they're indulging me. And it gets a little harder since it's because I'm all virtual now, but or not, they do a great job with it, and they will take it on. And so the other part that I really was excited about in the book was to give the teens some of the adolescents some of the same responses. So one of them when you were talking about the impact, this is another kid that always stays in my mind that we talked about in the book. This kid she transitioned in middle school, fantastic, just really healthy kid, supportive family, just a delight. Had a relatively, as far as transitions go, relatively smooth transition, even into high school, pretty smooth. And then she ran across I don't know, a guy who just had a really stupid thing to say one day. And he was an administrator that she respected a lot. And he came up to her and he said, it kind of like he's bringing her into his confidence in a creepy way. Hey, so have you had the surgery yet? Which I'm just like, are you serious? This kid is 17 years old. Why would you ever ask a question about her personal body parts? But anyway, this kid, and I just love the fact that we talk about so many role plays in this book. And this kid, she had worked with me individually, and we created this specifically for her because she was like, her biggest fear, and so many trans folks' biggest fear is that very horrific and awkward question. So this guy says this, obviously totally inappropriate, but her response, she nailed it, and she said, Mr. So-and-so, what it sounds like is that you're asking me a very personal and private question about my genitals. And what I'd like to do is turn that question around to you and ask you to describe your genitals in great detail. If I find your answer to be acceptable, then I will answer your question. And this guy obviously realized what a douchebag he was. And sorry, it just,
We
it just,
curse here on this podcast. You can drop all the
okay.
douchebags you want.
Thank you. You realized how inappropriate that response was, and shut it down. And we, I went in, we did all the damage control that had to happen. But my point is, we really tried to inject all of these, like, hey, this kid did this and it really worked well. This mom did this and it really worked well. Oh, and the final thing, and again, I'm going to give Elisa a lot about. She did in 2016, I realize it's not an exhaustive list anymore, but she did a phenomenal job putting a resource list together.
I just have to say, where were you when Hobbes shared his identity with me? Because this book, I've read a lot of books. Like, I think it's incumbent upon parents of gender expansive people to educate themselves. And I love that you actually give that advice in your book. Education, education, education. It should never stop because it's important if you're going to be an effective parent, an effective ally, an effective advocate on behalf of children or other children of gender expansive children, that you know what you're talking about. And your book is like steeped in information and facts. And one of the things that has happened, unfortunately, for parents of gender expansive children is that we fight this tsunami of disinformation all the time. And one of the ones that you pulled out in your book that I want to just talk about in chapter 2, you talk about the 80-20 statistic that says that 80% of trans kids revert to their, air quotes, original gender after puberty. Can you talk about this fallacious statistic and why it is so flawed and harmful?
Sure. First of all, that particular study included a lot of kids who weren't even trans, first of all. So it's flawed to begin with. So we can keep going with just pretending that it baseline started as a valid study and say that they also took the kids out of their research who just didn't keep coming to the clinic. They just said, oh, those kids are better. They're not better. They're not trans anymore. So they got thrown into the 80% of kids who, went back. The sample sizes were extremely small, again, just to begin with anyway. So there were an awful lot of reasons. It's not an empirical study at all. It's pseudoscience. And yet so many parents just get bombarded with, well, how about this? And I'll tell you a quick story. And Lisette, I think you're originally from Arizona, right? So again, this is another huge impact on my work. It was about a decade ago. I got a call from a family in Arizona who they had actually gotten a judge to put an order out that this trans femme kid, could not touch, wear, or play with anything that anyone would consider feminine. That's literally what the order said. So I was just like, what does that even mean? First of all, what do we define as looking like seeming feminine means what? Anyway, thankfully, the individual who was on the other side of this case, the guy who was like all about this judge's order, is the guy up in Canada who lost his license a number of years ago. He was the expert witness, also a pseudoscience guy. I was traumatized by this case, honestly, and I'm not even being hyperbolic. It was a horrific, terrible case. This poor child tried to commit suicide multiple times throughout this court case. It was just heart-wrenching. And the fact that they had to spend the money, go through the trauma, only to just be like, okay, well, the guy lost his license. I guess he's not a credible expert. Okay, well, go ahead and just play with, and do whatever you want to do. I mean, that's how arbitrary we handle trans people in this country. It's just appalling to me. And I'm sorry, I think I just went off on something maybe unrelated to anything you asked me.
No, it's really important that you bring this up because so much of what happens in parent communities is this regurgitation of misinformation that they're being fed, right? Like rapid
Mhm.
onset gender dysphoria.
Right.
Or,
Right.
I know tons of families that experienced bad therapists, and I have a long list of therapists that I'm like, never go to them because they have really fueled the harms that families are experiencing when we talk about anti-trans legislation across the state. People featured in the New York Times as credible, right, with their talk therapy. I think what you're saying is like so important because parent communities, WPATH, so much of those spaces are cis people making decisions around what care and support should look like. My question for you is, we saw a distressing Pew poll come out early in October that said that only 31% of trans people report being accepted by their parents. Because obviously your book is about mirroring, it's giving options, it's saying, look, this isn't that hard to navigate, this is how you deal with schools, etc. What is the best way that we can reach families and parents in order to get them on board to love and support their children? Because 31% is such a low and disheartening number when it comes to trans people finding love and support with their own parents.
Right. How do we do it? Oh my goodness. I have answers, but I don't know the answer. I think that we keep doing this collective work. We keep talking in ways that are pushing back against, I mean, the fundamentals of even the colonization of the therapeutic work. I mean, this is like, it depends on how deep we want to get with all of this, because I do feel like if you're talking about me personally, yeah, I had to do a lot of unprogramming. I have to do it every day. I'm a white person, and I don't mean poor me. I mean you better do it. So that's what has to be done personally. But as far as like this, the macro, I feel like the choir needs to keep normalizing what is normal, which is just living your life. And we need to stop capitulating to the just social contagions, the, oh my God, what if they regret it? Again, as a parent, I understand that we falsely think that we have the crystal ball just if our kid's not trans. We don't. None of my kids have turned out the way that I would have predicted they turn out in a whole lot of ways. And that doesn't mean, oh, I have the same experience as a parent of a trans kid. But I think that as parents of cis kids, we also have to say, you don't know how the hell your kid's going to turn out anyway. We all want our kids to turn out happy and healthy. So let's let all of our kids turn out that way.
Yeah, Lisette hit upon something really insightful with her question because your book came out at a time that this country was shifting. And that shift has become, I think, even more severe over the past few years. And certainly with the election, which just passed, of this particular individual who we shall not name. But because of this rightward shift that we've seen, how have you adjusted? How has your practice adjusted? How is the way you engage with parents and your youth clients? How has that changed to meet the moment where it is?
And if I can add, are you scared in this moment as a provider? Because so much of what we are seeing is not new. The criminalization of parents, doctors, providers, anyone supporting has been at the crux of so many of these anti-trans bills that have been filed in state houses for the last 8 years. So I just want to add that piece too.
Yeah, and I think, is the adage, if you're not pissed off, you're not paying attention. But if you're not scared, you're not paying attention either in this field. I mean, I think you have to be diligent is what you have to be. And you have to, admittedly, I'm covering my ass a heck of a lot more. And I don't mean that I ever used to be lazy. I just mean that I don't want something to go left that I didn't expect because I was a little too casual about it. So that has certainly changed. And that makes me sad because it's not like I'm doing better work now. It's just I'm doing more paperwork or more, saying more words than are necessary to say. And it's just like a waste of my time, to be honest. It's not like anybody's like, oh, well, thank God you finally explained it. I have to remind myself that this is still the work I want to be doing. And it has never been in doubt because I said 95% of my folks are transgender expansive and exploring. Those 5% of cis folks or, somebody's maybe a little bit queer and questioning or something like that. And it doesn't mean that those situations aren't real, but there are different nuances that cis folks have to navigate. And again, as I said to you before, and I just want to, again, I want to reiterate how much admiration I have for trans and gender expansive children, adolescents, and adults, but also their families. It's my favorite population to work with. And it also is the most complicated population to work with. And not complicated because the kids themselves or even the parents or caregivers are complicated, but because the society is so complicated about an issue that doesn't need to be that complicated. You all are just trying to walk through the world and just like, hey, just walking, just taking a walk around the neighborhood, and people are just throwing bricks and boulders and bulldozers coming at you for no good reason. That to me is just like, let's just keep talking about it. I don't put up with, and I am just, Stephen knows this, but I'm only 5'1". I'm not a big person and I'm not a terribly aggressive person, but I don't put up with bullshit when I hear it. And so if somebody does, and I've had this happen many, many, many times, I can be sitting alone at a bar having dinner. I can be taking a walk and over here. If somebody says something idiotic and untrue about trans people, I will stop dead in my tracks. I will start as respectfully as possible with all of my PhD education behind it. And then I'll just get as stupid as they are, if that's what it comes to, because I want to say, hey, you just might not know this yet. Let me share with you something I know, especially if it's a white person, especially if it's a woman, all the things where I'm just like, hey, I got you. I see you. And I know how we can bridge this gap. And I think that's another one of the things that just we as humans have to start doing is looking out for our fellow humans, because a lot of us really need it right now.
I'm about to title this episode Dear White People because damn, you hit the nail on the head. So I got distracted by your last comment, but I really did want to talk about something that we talked about last week, which was like an update to your book. Your book was published in 2016. It didn't get the run that you wanted because of the timing, and we all understand how things goes in the public industry, in the publishing industry. But some of the information in your book is now dated. Statistics around the number of organizations like the IOC and the NCAA and USA Swimming, which formerly had trans inclusive policies that enabled gender expansive people to participate. That has shifted somewhat. What adjustments were you given an opportunity, let's say the 10-year anniversary of this book being published, what adjustments would you make to make that more applicable and appropriate to the times, if any?
I'll tell you the thing that we did that I'm still thrilled and I will stand by for if we end up doing it, or somebody and I end up doing another book, is we did it without binary pronouns. And I'm really excited about that because I wanted to do that intentionally to say, this is not that difficult. Everybody can do it. Look, we wrote a whole book without being binary. So you can write your IEP plan, or you can do your Christmas card or anything else. It's not that difficult. So I would do that. Honestly, what would have to happen for this book to be an appropriate update is, and I'm reluctant to do the update right now because I don't want what's there to be in the book. I want to have hope that it's going to go back to being better so that I can update it in the way that I want to see the world. But I'll tell you, I also live in the world and I am reality based. And so if I were to do it, I would have to say, these are some of the legal implications that we didn't anticipate in 2016. We didn't think people would have to leave the country because they were trans. We thought it would be challenging in certain states, but we had no clue that that was going to be a mass exodus, for not mass exodus, but enough for enough of the families I work with, and obviously you. So, I didn't know that. That would not have been one of the things I would have said to parents, like, here's the list of things to go down. Like, is it safe to stay where you are?
All right, Dr. Angelo. I'm sorry, Michelle. This is your final question because I know you have a hard stop right now. So we're going to ask you one question and we're going to let you go.
I just want to say that you made me feel in my feels because if you would have asked me in December, I would have told you a year ago that we would never leave. And I think that's what makes this moment so difficult, is there's so many variables up in the air. With that being said, what gives you hope today? I mean, look, your community, you've lived through some shit too. I'm sure you have. You too experience the same levels of discrimination as trans people and are showing up as an ally. What brings you hope? Like, what are you seeing with families in community that makes you see that?
I have the answer because it just happened again the other day. And I am so blessed to have this job because I get immediate gratification. I mean, not that there's not challenges, but when the immediate gratification comes, it's like, bam, you can't help but feel it. When I started, the common conversation for most parents was in multiple times, not even just once. I felt like my job was to convince these parents to start re-loving their child. And I would go home crying. I had no capacity to compartmentalize that because I was like, oh my God, I can't, that's what just breaks my heart. I don't see that nearly as much now. And as screwed up as our world is right now and as on fire as it is in so many ways, I see the parents coming to me now saying, how can I do this better? How can I do this so that my kid doesn't have to get all the bullshit that I see these other kids getting over the years? How can I be the most loving, kind, generous human that I can be to other people beyond just my own kid? Because that's the other thing too that is giving me a lot of hope, is this isn't just about my kid anymore. And because that's what it used to be. You get these people who there is nothing else about them that, in my opinion, would be redeeming except the fact that they ended up loving their kid. But now it's just like, okay, good. You're loving your kid and you're seeing that perhaps some of the things that you were buying into before aren't true anymore. They were never true. They were never, ever true, but you can acknowledge it now, not just because your kid's trans and your kid's getting screwed over, but because now that might have been the catalyst. Okay, I'll take it. That sucks. But now you're not just, well, I'm this uptight MAGA person who happens to have a trans kid. It's like, oh, I have to rethink everything now.
Oh my God, Michelle, it has been so refreshing to have you on. I am so mad at us for not having you on sooner. I have to ask you, are you going to be in Harrisburg next year for Keystone?
Yes, I am. I am a sponsor of that conference, so I will definitely be there.
Okay, so perhaps you may be on the committee that accepts proposals because we put in another proposal for next year. So hopefully, fingers crossed, our workshop rather, will be accepted. But I'm not going to dither on about us. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. I so look forward to this episode coming out. We will let you know when it does, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. And I will look forward to seeing you in March too. I'm not on the committee, by the way, but I will definitely, I have a pretty strong feeling you guys will be there.
Wink, wink.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right,
you
get
so
out of here.
much.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. So,
Nice to
bye,
meet
guys.
you.
Ah.
Bye.
Now it's time for our recurring segment, Allies and Assholes, where we highlight individuals and groups who are supporting the LGBTQI community on the one hand and call out straight up assholes who are trying to move us all backwards on the other. Lisette, who are we talking about today?
Well, Stephen, our ally of the week is one of my favorite funny people, Margaret Cho. Margaret Cho took to Instagram to call out Pam Bondi's DOJ for defending a group of students who bullied a transgender student at school and were suspended as a result. In her IG post, Margaret said, "I can't believe this corrupt and dumb DOJ and nasty Pam Bondi. I will always support trans lives, and for those queer kids dealing with bullying, we will get them. We love you."
All I can say is, you better work, Margaret Cho. It's so refreshing whenever anyone of note uses their platform to send out these positive messages to trans youth, especially in times where it just seems like they just keep getting tossed under the bus. Time and time again, our elected officials are failing our trans youth. Time and time again, our trans youth are being vilified and made the objects of hatred. And instead of the Department of Justice actually standing up for people who are the victims of discrimination, the Bondi DOJ is defending the harassers, the bullies. Like, imagine that they are going to court to actually represent the people that have been accused of engaging in discrimination. Like, that's asinine. And good on Margaret Cho for calling it what it is, bullshit.
And that is why Margaret Cho is our ally of the week.
Congratulations to Margaret Cho. Now on to our asshole of the week. So, Lisette, this week's asshole of the week goes to someone who I cannot believe has not been the asshole of the week every single week. U.S. Republican Representative from Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Greene, aka Bleach Blonde, Bad Built, butch body. Why, you might ask, did Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene make our asshole of the week list this week? Well, it's because she has introduced legislation as part of the impending government shutdown discussions to once again permanently remove transgender people from receiving gender affirming care across the country.
Now, Stephen, there was lots of conversation, people discussing online that she was on a redemption tour, probably withholding her vote so that she could help save the subsidies covered under the ACA. But no, she withheld her vote because she was angry that her provision to make providing and or accessing gender affirming care a Class C felony for doctors and parents. Stephen, this is harmful. It is a harmful, dangerous bill. And this woman is evil and vile. All she cares about is lining her pockets and doing as much harm as she can before she retires.
Listen, when she announced her retirement from Congress, everyone was like, oh, this riff with Trump is really getting to her. No, she got paid. She clocked in her little period of time as an elected official, $25 million cash out, and she's still the same person. There is no mea culpator. She is still the same nasty, mean, ugly, little, petty person she's always been. And if you haven't watched the 60 Minutes interview with her, please do. It's educational. But we know she's the same nasty little person she's always been, and she's never going to change. A zebra doesn't change its stripes. Her amendment is described as extreme and harmful because it would restrict access to all necessary medical care while allowing non-consensual surgeries on intersex individuals. It's just horror wrapped in an amendment. And this is why Georgia Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, aka Bleach Blonde, Bad Built, Butch Body, is our asshole of the week. Well, that's our show for today, folks. I'd like to thank our guest, Dr. Michele Angello, for joining us today. And of course, I got to give it up to my co-host, Rocker from Spain, Lisette Trujillo, for always doing the damn thing.
And we got to thank you, Stephen, the dad, the one who's paving the way for other dads to show up and love their trans kids. I couldn't do this without you. And obviously, we together couldn't do this without all of you, our listeners. So thank you for tuning in to the Parent Advocate Podcast.
And folks, please be sure to subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channel, follow us on Instagram and TikTok, and do everything you've got to do to stay up to date with everything going on here at the Parent Advocate Podcast. Goodbye.
Goodbye.